A taxi driver in New York City knows his name. Your grandmother knows his name. A teenager in Tokyo buying a handbag knows his name. But you probably have no idea who he is or how he got everything. His name is Bernard Arnault, and he is, or was, depending on the week, the single richest human being on the planet Earth. Not Elon Musk, not Jeff Bezos. This guy. He owns Louis Vuitton. He owns Christian Dior. He owns Tiffany, Sephora, Givenchy, Fendi, Tag Heuer, Dom Perignon, Moet, and Chandon and Hennessy. 75 brands, 213,000 employees, over $80 billion in revenue last year alone. And here's what makes this story insane. He didn't inherit any of it. He didn't start a tech company. He didn't invent anything. He took it, all of it. Piece by piece, brand by brand, boardroom by boardroom, through the most ruthless series of corporate raids, hostile takeovers, and betrayals that the business world has ever seen. The French call him the Wolf in Cashmere. And by the end of this series, you'll understand exactly why. But every wolf was once a pup, and this one was born in a place you've never heard of, a cold, grey factory town in northern France, where nobody wore luxury. I need to tell you three things before we go any further. First, there's a moment in this video involving a taxi driver and a single question that completely rewired Bernard Arnault's brain. It's the moment that created the LVMH empire. Don't skip ahead. Second, there's a detail about his childhood that's so disturbing, so revealing, that once you hear it, you will never look at successful people the same way again. And third, by the end of this video, you'll understand a secret about luxury that 99% of people never figure out. A secret worth literally $500 billion. This is part one of the Cashmere Wolf. Roubaix, France, March 5th, 1949. Close your eyes and picture this. A city where chimneys outnumber churches, where the sky is permanently grey and the air tastes like coal dust and damp wool, where every other building is a factory, brick walls blackened by a century of soot, windows rattling with the vibration of 10,000 mechanical looms. This is Roubaix, the textile capital of France. They called it the City of 1,000 Chimneys. The French Manchester. At its peak, this single city produced more cloth than anywhere else in the country. Workers from across Europe, Belgians, Italians, Poles, Spaniards, poured in to work the mills. This was a city built on wool, fueled by sweat, and defined by one single idea: you work hard, you keep your head down, and you never, ever dream too big. And it was dying. By the late 1940s, cheap imports from Asia were gutting the French textile industry. Factories were closing. Workers were being laid off by the thousands. The golden age was rotting from the inside. This is the world that Bernard Jean-Etienne Arnault was born into. Now, pay attention here, because this part matters more than you think. Bernard's family wasn't poor. They were upper middle class, comfortable. His father, Jean-Léon Arnault, owned a civil engineering company called Ferret Savinel. They built roads, bridges, drainage systems, boring, unglamorous work. The kind of business where you come home with dust on your shoes and concrete under your nails. His grandfather on his mother's side, Etienne Savinel, had founded the company. So this was a dynasty, not of luxury, not of fashion, but of concrete and steel. The Arnault family built things. That was the identity. That was the unwritten law. Bernard would go to school, get a respectable diploma, come back to Roubaix, and one day take the reins of the family construction firm. Maybe expand a little, maybe hire a few more workers, but stay in your lane. Stay in the north, stay in concrete. Nobody in the Arnault family had ever done anything glamorous. Nobody had ever appeared in a magazine. Nobody had ever set foot in a fashion house. The Arnauts were builders, solid, dependable, invisible. The kind of people who keep a country running, but never make the front page. End of story. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. But Bernard's mother, Marie-Joseph, was a completely different creature. She was a pianist. She played Chopin and Debussy for hours while the factories hummed outside the window. She subscribed to Vogue, to Elle, to Marie Claire, and she had one obsession that didn't belong in Roubaix, one obsession that would accidentally create the richest man on earth, Christian Dior. In the 1950s, Dior was the most glamorous name. Now, here's the detail I warned you about, the one that changes how you see successful people forever. Bernard was not a normal child. He was quiet, intense, watchful, and his mind was frightening. In school, he dominated everything, but especially mathematics. Numbers came to him the way music came to his mother, effortlessly, fluently. He could solve equations in his head that his classmates needed paper for. He could see patterns where other students saw random noise. His teachers called him exceptional. His classmates just knew one thing: don't compete with Bernard. Because Bernard always wins, always. But it wasn't just the intelligence, it was the temperament. Even as a boy, Bernard showed an instinct for business that was almost unnatural. He would play shopkeeper with his siblings, setting up little stores in the living room, calculating costs, tracking profits, finding ways to maximize every centime. While other boys played football in the street, Bernard was running miniature businesses. His father noticed. He started bringing the boy to the office, to construction sites, letting him sit in on meetings. Bernard absorbed everything: how contracts were negotiated, how workers were managed, how power was exercised, not through shouting, but through quiet control. His mother, being a pianist, enrolled him in piano lessons. Bernard attacked the instrument with the same obsession he brought to everything else. He practiced until his fingers ached, and he got good. Genuinely good. People around him thought he might pursue music seriously. He had the talent. He had the dedication. Then one day as a teenager, Bernard Arnault quit the piano. Cold. Just stopped. Not because he lost interest, not because he found something better. He quit because he realized he would never be the absolute best pianist in France. There were prodigies out there, kids who'd been playing since age 3, for whom music was oxygen, for whom the piano was their entire identity. Bernard looked at them, did the math in his head, and arrived at a conclusion. I cannot be number one at this. So he walked away from something he genuinely loved, coldly, completely, without looking back, because second place to Bernard Arnault was the same as last place. In 1967, Bernard walked through the gates of the most elite institution in France, the École Polytechnique. If you're American, think MIT combined with West Point, military discipline, founded by Napoleon himself. The entrance exams are so brutal that students spend 2 to 3 years in special preparatory schools just to have a chance. Only the top fraction of 1% gets in. In France, there's a phrase, la religion du diplôme, the religion of the diploma. Your school defines your life. And Elix, that's what they call the Polytechnique, is God. Bernard didn't just get in, he thrived. Military uniforms, marching in formation, and behind the discipline, the most savage intellectual training in France. Abstract algebra, differential equations, optimization theory. Students didn't just solve problems, they had to prove why their solutions were the only possible solutions, under relentless questioning from professors who ate ambiguity for breakfast. This is where Bernard learned the skill that would make him the most feared businessman in Europe. Systems thinking. How to look at any structure, a bridge, a company, an entire industry, and see exactly how it works, where it's strong, where it's weak, and how to take it apart. He graduated in 1971, 22 years old, armed with the mind of an engineer and the instincts of a predator. What happened next should terrify you. He joined his father's company. That was expected. Jean-Léon wanted his son to learn the business the way French sons had always learned. Start at the bottom, earn respect, to take over in 20 years. Bernard lasted about 6 months before he tried to blow the whole thing up. He walked into his father's office in 1974, 25 years old, 3 years out of school, and made a demand that shook the family to its foundation. Sell the construction division, all of it. Liquidate the company that his grandfather had built with his own hands. the company that employed hundreds of people, the company that was the Arnault family name. His father was stunned. This was the family legacy. Workers depended on this company. Bernard's own grandfather had built it from nothing. But Bernard didn't come with emotion. He came with spreadsheets, projections, margin analysis. He laid out his case with the cold precision of an engineer presenting a mathematical proof. The construction industry is dying. The margins are razor thin. Any competitor with a truck and a crew can undercut us. Our capital is trapped in a declining asset. Every year we wait, we lose money. We need to pivot, Bernard told his father. But even running a successful real estate company on the Riviera, that wasn't enough. Bernard could feel it. The same restlessness that made him quit the piano. The same hunger that made him gut the family business. Something was whispering, "This is too small. You are meant for more." Then something happened that changed everything. Not something Bernard did, something France did. In 1981, François Mitterrand, a socialist, was elected president. His government immediately went nuclear on the wealthy, nationalizing banks, nationalizing industries, jacking up taxes to confiscatory levels. French businessmen panicked. Money was fleeing the country like rats from a sinking ship. Bernard Arnault did something nobody expected. He left, packed up his wife Anne, their two young children, Delphine and Antoine, and moved to the United States, to Palm Beach, Florida. And that's where the wolf opened its eyes. Forget the condo developments he built in Palm Beach. Those made money, sure. A project called The Princess, high-end units for wealthy retirees. Successful. But the real education was happening in his mind, not on the construction sites. Palm Beach in the early 1980s was the epicenter of global wealth. Old money from the Vanderbilts and the Kennedys. New money from Wall Street traders and Texas oil barons. European money from industrialists fleeing socialist taxes, Latin American money from the boom years before the debt crisis, all of it converging on this narrow strip of Florida coastline, where the lawns were impossibly green, and the cars in every driveway cost more than most Americans' houses. Bernard watched everything. He attended galas, he played tennis at the clubs, he walked through the boutiques on Worth Avenue, the Palm Beach version of the Champs-Élysées. He studied these people with the analytical eye of an engineer reverse engineering a machine. And what he saw fascinated him. These people didn't just buy expensive things, they bought specific brands, and they were obsessive about it. A woman would pay $20,000 for a Hermes Birkin bag, and then wait 2 years on a list for the privilege. A man would spend $10,000 on a watch he could barely read. They weren't buying function. They were buying something far more powerful. They were buying identity, status, the feeling of belonging to a world that most people could only dream about. Hermes, Cartier, Rolex, and above all, Dior, the name his mother had whispered in Roubaix. These brands weren't just products. They were religions. And the stores were the churches. But here's what makes Bernard Arnault different from every other businessman who ever had a big idea in the back of a taxi. And this is the key to the entire series. So listen carefully. Bernard Arnault is not a fashion designer. He has never sketched a dress, never draped a fabric, never styled a model. He cannot tell the difference between organza and chiffon. He is an engineer, a mathematician, a predator who thinks in systems. Every luxury mogul before him came from the creative world. They understood beauty and aesthetics, but they ran their businesses like artists, emotionally, chaotically, following their instincts instead of their balance sheets. And many of them drove their legendary brands straight into bankruptcy. Arnault saw what they couldn't see, an entire industry of iconic heritage brands, most of them family-owned, most of them poorly managed, many of them bleeding money, sitting there like unpolished diamonds in the mud. All they needed was someone cold enough to calculate their true value and ruthless enough to take them. The luxury industry didn't need another designer. It needed a wolf. And Bernard Arnault was about to put on the cashmere. He returned to France in 1983, 34 years old, and with one single question burning through his engineer's brain like acid. What can I buy? The answer came in the form of a bankrupt textile empire called Saint-Frère. It was a disaster. A massive, crumbling conglomerate, drowning in debt. But buried inside that wreckage, like a diamond hidden in rubble, was a single priceless asset. Christian Dior. The same name his mother had worshipped. The same name the taxi driver had recognized. The same name that had been whispering in Bernard Arnault's ear since he was a boy in Roubaix, watching his mother turn the pages of Vogue. He was about to spend $15 million of his family's money to buy it, and then he was going to fire 9,000 people. The newspapers would call him the Terminator. Workers would march in the streets. All of France would hate him.